Of MPs said the jury is still out. Yes, they said aspects of the so-called dodgy dossier undermine the government's case for war. But no, they insisted, although they split along party lines, the Prime Minister and his Director of Communications, Alastair Campbell, didn't intentionally mislead us. Well, straight now to our political editor in Downing Street, Nick.
Andrew, if you were hoping for a once-and-for-all answer to that vital question, were we misled to justify a war? I'm afraid that this report doesn't produce the answer to that. In truth, we're at the beginning of a process and not the end. What the committee of MPs that produced this report had to do, though, is ask a narrower question. Did the politicians behind me there, did they lean on the intelligence community? Did they hype up the intelligence? And on that question, they were split as to the answer, as my colleague, political correspondent Libby Wiener, now reports.
After all the deliberations, the verdict today on whether the government deceived the country over going to war. Not guilty, the Labour committee chairman told the assembled media.
We conclude that ministers did not mislead Parliament.
And on the question of whether they exaggerated the threat in one document.
There were allegations that it was embellished or exaggerated in order to make a stronger case. The committee concludes on the basis of the evidence before it that this did not happen.
But the committee was split down the middle on party lines, with Conservatives saying without any evidence of weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, they couldn't be certain about the intelligence.
The jury is still out. It cannot be said today that that assessment was incorrect, nor can it be said to be correct. It remains to be seen which it was.
The committee concluded that undue prominence was given to the claim that Iraq could launch weapons of mass destruction within 45 minutes, but they were split on Alastair Campbell's role.
6 members of the committee believed that there was ample evidence to exonerate him. 4 members believed that they could not reach a decision either way on the basis of the available evidence.
This morning, Alastair Campbell was again attacking the BBC.
The BBC has not provided a shred of evidence to substantiate the story. I think when fair and reasonable people see the evidence, they will realise that the story is untrue, and the BBC should acknowledge that.
And later, a demand for a straight apology over allegations that Alastair Campbell influenced the presentation of evidence, this time from the Foreign Secretary.
I believe that the BBC should now apologise. And I note that even the BBC governors, in their statement last night, did not defend the accuracy of this claim.
But the government was roundly criticised for the so-called dodgy dossier, which included a plagiarised PhD thesis.
It is breathtaking in the extreme to find that a document could be produced in the way it was, that the Prime Minister was misled.
Even with this report, the controversy over the lead-up to war appears far from over. Libby Wiener, ITV News, Westminster.
So today's report offers something for both sides in the Dossier Row to grab hold of. It is a difficult tale to get your head round, so let's just remind ourselves of what's at stake. For the BBC, well, on the surface, this was a row over the accuracy and independence of its journalism. But lurking beneath is the discomfort that its unique position, funded by the government and separate from it, can bring. The government itself is playing for even higher stakes. It's under pressure because it used the dossiers to help justify going to war on Saddam Hussein. Question the accuracy of those dossiers, especially their evidence on weapons of mass destruction, and you question the main reason we were given for military action. And that issue, where are the weapons, is moving back to the fore today, in the light of the MP's criticism of some aspects of the dossiers. It may never be properly resolved unless weapons are actually found. Well, perhaps the government's strongest critic on that subject is the former Foreign Secretary Robin Cook. He joins me from Westminster now. Mr. Cook, after this stinging criticism of the dossiers, do you think that this debate is now going to refocus on the government's justification for war?
Well, I very much hope so, because that's the real issue. I do recognise that Alistair Campbell has played a brilliant hand in the last fortnight trying to turn this into a report on his war with Andrew Gilligan, but it was always going to be about Britain's war with Iraq and the justification for it. And I agree totally with the committee that the case for that war and the case of the accuracy of the September dossier will only stack up if the government comes up with real weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. It hasn't yet, and I think the committee is quite right to say that unless the government can produce this by the time that they respond to the committee's report, then the government is going to have to admit it was wrong.
Now, you've said that the government didn't act in bad faith, but you've also said that some of the information in those dossiers was just plumb wrong.
Yes.
Who is responsible then?
Well, I'm very content to leave that to the government to come up with their answer to the question. I noticed, and it's been quite entertaining during this study of the Foreign Affairs Committee, there have been many people willing to say it was not them. Alistair Campbell's indignant at the idea that he came up with the claims in the September dossier. Jack Straw said that the claim that Iraq would have weapons ready in 45 minutes was not his claim. But somebody somewhere wrote that, and the government owes it to the public to tell them who it was that came up with that information. Why is it that they can't stand it up? Do remember, we went to war because of these claims that have now turned out to be unjustified. We could have avoided this war, we could have let the UN weapons inspectors finish their job, we could have saved several thousand lives.
Mr. Cook, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Well, to tie everything together for us, I'm joined once again by our political editor. Nick, this is a complicated document, it's contradictory. Do you think now that this will refocus people on the key issue for the government? Where are those weapons of mass destruction?
Well, it is worth remembering that that is the key issue, isn't it? And if they're found, it is worth saying this again and again, if they're found in the weeks and months to come, most of this will seem an irrelevant sideshow occupying people like me with nothing better to do. If, though, they're not found, then those questions that Robin Cook is posing will keep coming back to haunt the government. Was the intelligence just plain wrong, but accidentally so? Was it hyped up by the intelligence community? Or, as this committee asked today, did the politicians lean, in effect, on the intelligence community to get them to hype it up? And today, on that critical question, this committee of MPs really couldn't agree.
No, Nick, as far as the dossier row itself is concerned, do you think that that's buried now, or are heads going to roll?
Oh no, it's not buried for 1 second. The argument will go on. Alistair Campbell has got the backing of the Foreign Secretary, the Prime Minister, the heads of all the intelligence services, but the BBC still says, we've got a source that casts doubt. He will not sleep until he gets that apology, or I suspect he finds another job.
Nick, thank you very much indeed. Well, to other news now. 3 people have been killed and 7 others injured when the minibus they were in was hit by a train. The accident happened near Evesham in Worcestershire this morning. The bus, which was carrying farm workers, was crossing the tracks on private land when the train hit. Here's Emma Murphy.
As rescue workers surveyed the scene of this morning's accident, the investigation was already underway to establish how the 703 from Hereford to London collided with the minibus. Some distance away, the mangled wreckage of the white bus could be seen shunted down the track by the impact. The first emergency service workers on the scene discovered 3 bodies and 4 other passengers injured, 2 seriously. The accident happened shortly before 8:30 at an unmanned private crossing near Evesham in Worcestershire. It's thought the dead and injured were farmhands, some foreign workers. No one on board the train was injured. The crossing had a telephone for drivers to contact the signaller to establish if it was safe to continue. Police are attempting to establish if that call was ever made. Emma Murphy, ITV News.
Well, Geraint Vincent is at the scene now. Geraint, I understand that this investigation is taking a rather unusual turn.
Yeah, it is, Andrea, but we've just had an update from the police on the injury figure, so let me give you that first. We're now talking about 3 people dead, 3 people with serious injuries, and 5 people who escaped with minor injuries. All those people, I should say, were on the minibus. But yes, we are in the middle of a police search operation here. The police helicopter is circling the skies above us, and that is because police don't know how many passengers there were on that minibus. There is this suggestion that for whatever reason, 1 or maybe 2 passengers fled the scene of the accident. Now, very little is known about them or what they were doing here, but police are working on the suggestion that we're talking about a group of foreign nationals. So there's that side of the inquiry, but the focus of the investigation is, of course, trying to work out what happened on that crossing at 8:10 this morning, and that's where efforts are focused at the moment.
OK, Geraint, thank you very much indeed.